Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second webinar on the revisions to the Level 3 and Level 5 standards. Thank you very much for joining us today. I can see that the numbers are just still creeping up, so we'll just give it a couple of seconds for people just to come through while we're still in that first minute of 9 o'clock. The numbers are just slowly creeping up. So thanks very much. And just as a little reminder, we'll be running this in the same way that we ran the first webinar, where for the first 45 minutes, we'll cover the Level 3 Team Leader Standard revisions. And then at 9:45, we will then, in effect, begin the webinar again and cover the revisions to the Level 5 Operations Manager. So I think the numbers are there or thereabouts now. So thank you for joining us, and we'll begin the webinar. So the focus of this session today is the best practice approach to assessment. We will just begin by doing the usual housekeeping. Just so everybody knows what we're covering today. So this session is being recorded, so this will be sent to all attendees after the webinar, so give us a couple of days and we'll get that out to you. Everyone is on mute, so please do pop your questions in the chat box in the control panel, and we will endeavour to answer them at various points throughout, but everybody is on mute. You'll also get the slides along with the webinar recording, and of course both of these will be uploaded to the ILM website within a few days as well. So if you, for some reason, the email gets blocked, then you can access them directly from the ILM website. We are updating the platform to include a transcribe function going forward. Unfortunately, we don't have it for this particular session, but it is something that we are looking at going forward. So that should be available hopefully on the next webinar. And I've already mentioned about questions, so please do pop them in that control panel. And any questions that we don't get to answer throughout the webinar today, then along with the slides and the webinar recording, will include a Q&A with the updates. And if the session cuts off, then please do go back to your original webinar link to go back into come back into the session. You can always join over the telephone, so select phone call in the audio panel if it's the bandwidth and the video playing that causes a problem. So please do that. And then if I could just ask a couple of people just to check that you can all hear me. If one or two people could just pop into the chat or the question function that you are receiving me loud and clear today. Yep, perfect. Thanks, Abby and Heather. That's great. We'll now move on and look at what we're going to cover today. So we are just going to do the usual introduction, so you can see the team that will be here just to talk to you about the aspects of these revisions. Rashenda will talk to us a little bit about the background and where we are with the changes to both the Level 3 and the Level 5. Rebecca will then go into the detail of the assessment plan, which I think is probably the thing that most people are waiting for. Maurice will talk to us about EPA considerations, and then I will jump in and talk a little bit about the timelines for EPA, the benefits of working with us, and our next events. So you can see the team there. So that's myself. So I'm Julie Rowlett, and I'm the ILM Technical Advisor. So of course on hand to answer any questions that you might have about the revisions to the standard. So please do reach out. You've got my details there. You've got Rashenda there, who's our product manager. So Rashenda's very, very close to this and has been part of all the Trailblazer groups in terms of getting to the stage where we're at with these revisions. Maurice is one of our specialist EPA partnership managers. So any questions about the platforms and that support going through into our EPA Pro. And Rebecca is one of our lead independent endpoint assessors. So Rebecca actually takes part in running our assessments and also the verification of the assessments. So she's also very, very close to these changes. And what I'll now do is hand you over to Rashenda, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the background and how we've got to where we are with the Level 3 team leader. Over to you, Rashenda.
Thank you, Julie. Can you put the next slide on, please? So good morning, everybody. We welcome you here today. In terms of I'm just going to recap what I said in webinar 1 really, but there may be some of you who didn't attend that, and I think it's really important to just verify where we're at. We've got 2 days to go. So in essence, this standard has not changed its STO number. However, it has changed its title to team leader. So when it's important because if you go online now on IFAIT's website to have a look for that standard, it will not be live. You'll have to go in to the hyperlink that says this is in revision. It is due out in 2 days' time on the 19th, where that it will replace the existing team leader supervisor. So as stated, we have a new funding band, which is £5,000. Just remember, this is for new starts only. Anybody who is registered on the 19th or thereafter, you can put in for the maximum funding band of £5,000, dependent on the attributions of the person, the apprentice who's been employed. You will see here we've got a typical practical period, which has been extended from 12 months. It is now 15 months. And you might understand a little bit more why when Rebecca comes onto the content of that standard, and you can see the reasons why it's been extended. To note, all the KSBs have changed, and with that, what we have is you will see that they've been aligned to what we call the occupational profile and duties. So if you think about the occupational profile, we're given a very broad purpose of what this person, the persona of this apprentice should be. They should be a team leader, and their role will be operational and maybe project based. Working around, some might be managing resources, some might be managing teams, some may not. So it's really important you have a look at that operational profile and the duties within that. So, for example, we've got a duty 8 would say that that person needs to be able to contribute to change and support others through change. Now, what you need to remember with the occupational profile and the duties is that this is something that they will be able to do over the duration of their training. It isn't something they come in with, it is what they should be able to acquire, that opportunity to train and become competent at by the time of their end of their practical training period. So I have noticed the case 23 knowledge statements there are evidence in the plan, with 19 skills and 5 behaviours. The behaviours are pretty much standard across all level 3 apprenticeship standards now. IFAIT have put what they've done is they've contributed to a set of behaviours expected at each level. So again, be very mindful of that when you're looking at these behaviours. We've got here the gateway is 3 months, and what I think is really important today is you really sort of take away from Rebecca's session today about the EPA parameters, because there is a switch of emphasis of where those KSBs sit, which is different from the current team leader supervisor. So there is some element of change there. So good luck, everybody, for all you with the new starts on the 19th and thereafter. I'm sure you will be, you will be very, very successful. And as ever, myself and the team are here to support you. So thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Rashenda. That's a great summary. And we will now hand you over to Rebecca, who's going to take you through the detail of the assessment plan. Thanks, Rebecca.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Rashenda. Yeah, as you mentioned in the introductions, I'm Rebecca Lindley, and I'm the lead independent endpoint assessor for one of the standards. And I just want to welcome you to this deeper dive into the new level 3 team leader standards. The previous webinar, hopefully some of you were on that, was on the 29th of August, and we compared the existing level 3 team leader supervisor standard with the new team leader standard, and we looked then at the change in focus and the new KSVs. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the gateway requirements. So the endpoint assessment takes place after the on-program phase, which, as Rashenda mentioned previously, typically lasts for 15 months. The endpoint assessment is completed within the EPA period, which again typically lasts for 3 months. Now, what they've got to do within that is they've got to have, for the requirements of Gateway, they've got to complete the on-program training, including any off-the-job training. They must achieve those English and maths, as again, that's in line with the funding rules. They need to complete the Gateway requirement forms. They need to submit a portfolio of evidence in line with the required KSVs. And this is the first piece of work that the IEPA gets. And they use this portfolio to guide them to select a presentation title, which they think is going to enable the apprentice to provide the best presentation and therefore be able to achieve those highest grades. Access requirements and reasonable adjustments approved should have been submitted and approved pre-Gateway. Now, Julie is going to pick up later on in this presentation around that. So within the team leader, there are 2 methods of assessment. The first is the presentation with questions. So it's a duration of 50 minutes in its entirety. That's 20 minutes typically for the presentation, 30 minutes for the question and answer, and there is a plus 10% discrepancy really, which enables the apprentice to answer their last question. Same again for the professional discussion, based or underpinned, should I say, by the portfolio of evidence, and that is the same duration, 60 minutes plus 10%. Now, both of these assessment methods are designed to assess the apprentice's competence in their role, as Rashenda mentioned, and their exposure to those 13 duties. Now, they can be taken in any order. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please, Julie. So this is a lovely, simple overview of the grading criteria. So there is no change in the grading criteria. So it's either fail, pass, or distinction. All assessment pass criteria must be passed to achieve the pass, and all pass and distinction criteria must be achieved to be awarded the distinction. I will go on and talk about resits and retakes later on. So if we could just move on to the second slide. So I just want to take a moment really to emphasize the roles and responsibilities. And I know it's a little bit like teaching you to suck eggs, but with these 13 duties, it becomes even more important. So the success of the endpoint assessment process really relies on this effective collaboration of the key stakeholders that you can see down the screen. So let's talk about the apprentice first of all. Oh, Rashenda, good morning. We can see your face. So the apprentice must complete all of their training. They must compile the portfolio and they must meet all of those Gateway requirements. Now, the employer, they are responsible for supporting the apprentice, selecting the endpoint assessment organisation, and confirming the apprentice's readiness for the endpoint assessment. So without the employer confirming that they're ready, the endpoint assessment can't go ahead. And it's also key that they provide the opportunity for the apprentice to have exposure within those 13 duties, so that they are able to discuss that at endpoint assessment. Now, the training provider, so that's yourselves, support the apprentice with all the training, advises their employer on the apprentice's progress. And again, in those tripartite meetings, it's really important that you're checking with the employer that that exposure to those 13 duties is happening, because that's going to directly impact the level of detail the apprentice can give at that endpoint assessment. Now, our duty as the endpoint assessment organisation is that we conduct the endpoint assessment in line with the standards, that we ensure fair assessment, and we award the final grade. Okay, thank you. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Julie. So we've mentioned the duties a lot, and I don't know if anybody has managed to take a look at those yet. And I do apologise that there's lots of text on the screen, but you will get these slides. So both assessment methods, that's the professional discussion and the presentation with questions, cover a range of knowledge, skills and behaviours. All of these are related to all the duties. So in essence, all of those 13 duties are tested in the professional discussion, and again they are tested in the presentation with questions. So just to reiterate, it really is so important that the employer and the training provider ensure the apprentice is able to get exposure to all 13 duties throughout that apprenticeship period. Okay, if you could move on to the next slide. I just want to give a quick overview on the weighting of the team leader assessment components. So it is a 50-50 split, presentation with questioning, and the professional discussion underpinned by a portfolio of evidence. And again, the grading criteria is there. What I'm going to do in the next slides is break those assessment components down for you. Please be typing as many questions as you've got into that chat box, because hopefully we're going to be able to answer some of those as well within this session. So Julie, if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So the first assessment method I'm going to talk about is the presentation with questions. Again, like I mentioned at the start, these can be taken in any order. So the presentation with questions assessment method is a key component of the endpoint assessment for the Level 3 Team Leader Apprenticeship. In this method, the apprentice delivers a presentation on a set topic to an independent assessor. No change there, and it's followed by a question and answer section. Now, this ensures that the topics are not only relevant, but allow the apprentice to draw on their learning and experience gained throughout their apprenticeship. The presentation allows the apprentice to directly demonstrate their knowledge, skills and behaviours. Now, specifically those related to communication and presentation. So in the KSBs relating to that, you're looking at the section which is basically around communication and implementing operational plans. So there are a range of KSBs in there, and just by taking part in this presentation, there's an element of competency surrounding their communication and presentation skills. So it also provides the opportunity to use authentic workplace context. There's your 13 duties coming in, which also increases the assessment validity in relation to the apprentice's occupational role. So what the presentation does is it assesses their understanding of a particular subject. The independent assessor prepares relevant questions that are directly pertinent to the presentation context. The use of those real workplace contexts enhances the validity of the assessments directly relating to the apprentice's role, and it's carefully structured to allow the apprentice to demonstrate the KSBs mapped to this method and gain the highest available grade. So what is the presentation or what should it cover? Well, it should cover key areas such as a summary of their role as a team leader, their responsibilities and how these align with the broad goals of the organisation. Topics may include reviewing ways to reduce costs, how they use data and technology to support organisational goals, improving team performance and leading through change. Again, topics will be released, and there is a variety that will be devised by City and Guilds, and on review of that portfolio, that's when those topic the presentation topics will be released to the apprentices. Now, the themes that should be covered, excuse me, in the presentation, regardless of the topic area, should include data collection and benchmarking, problem analysis and conclusions, people and relationship, and future plans and opportunities. Now, to facilitate the assessment, apprentices are required to submit their presentation materials to City and Guilds by the end of the 4th week of the endpoint assessment period. Okay, if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk now about the portfolio of evidence. Now, this is the one that's submitted at Gateway, and this underpins the professional discussion. Now, the portfolio of evidence typically includes 16 discrete pieces of evidence. It assesses the apprentice's understanding. Once the independent assessor reviews it, they prepare relevant questions that are directly pertinent to the presentation context and the discussion. Oh, I do apologise, I've not changed my screen, just scrap that part. So the portfolio of evidence, like I said, contains 16 discrete pieces of evidence. Again, it's a critical component of the apprenticeship, and it provides the foundation for the professional discussion assessment. Now, the apprentices must compile evidence that directly relates to the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are going to be evaluated in that professional discussion. The discrete pieces of evidence that they include must be mapped to the KSBs outlined in the professional discussion. Now, what evidence to include? So acceptable evidence, I mean, this is not kind of a one-stop shop. There are more evidences, but just as an overview, they can include workplace documents like policies and procedures, witness statements, annotated photographs or video clips. Now, there is a limit. They can only be up to 5 minutes long, but these need to show the apprentice actively engaging in their role. It's essential to note you need to avoid reflective accounts or any self-assessment methods, and any contributions from the employer should be based on direct observations rather than opinions. As usual, the evidence must be valid and clearly attributable to the apprentice. And again, this is confirmed as usual with statements from both the employer and the apprentice that the work is their own. Although the portfolio isn't itself assessed directly, it does play a crucial role in underpinning the professional discussion. And like I mentioned, the independent assessor uses this to formulate questions. After their review, assessors do not provide feedback on the portfolio itself. We focus instead on the discussion to gauge that competence. So if we could move on to the next slide, Julie, please. So this is around that professional discussion. So the professional discussion is underpinned by the portfolio of evidence, and it involves a structured, formal two-way conversation between the apprentice and the independent assessor. Throughout this discussion, the apprentices can refer to and use their portfolio of evidence to support and illustrate their responses. Therefore, during the discussion, the apprentice must have access to their portfolio of evidence, which they can use to reference and substantiate their answers. And just as a point here, please, we try and put apprentices at ease during their endpoint assessment. It's really important to stress it's not a memory test, and it is all right for the apprentice to refer to that. So please, if that can get through to the apprentices, that would be appreciated. The discussion is scheduled to last for 60 minutes. With a potential extension of a 10% additional time. Now, this time can only be used to allow the apprentice to complete their answers thoroughly. It's not an opportunity for the assessor to add any additional questions. So the assessor will ask a minimum of 5 questions. These are designed to elicit responses that demonstrate the apprentice's competence against the grading criteria for the highest available grade. Probing questions, extension questions will be in there as well. And the professional discussion is carefully structured to cover key themes relevant to the apprentice's role. These include building a high-performing team. So these themes, if you can prepare your apprentice to be covering these, so these include building high-performing teams, communicating and implementing operational plans, managing change and continuous improvement, using technology effectively, and contributing to projects. So again, the key role of the independent assessor is that they are responsible for guiding this conversation, ensuring that it remains focused and relevant to the mapped KSBs. So they will make sure the apprentice doesn't go off track and will keep it tightly focused to enable all questions to be asked. Okay, if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this again has not changed. So resits and retakes. A failed assessment method must be resat or retaken within a 6-month period from that endpoint outcome notification. Otherwise, the entire endpoint assessment will need to be resat or retaken in full. So just to reiterate, if they fail a presentation but pass the professional discussion, in order to just pass that component, they need to sit that again within that 6-month period. If it falls outside that, then they're going to have to take the whole assessment again. However, there are considerations around that which I'm going to go into later on. Now, the employer and the endpoint assessment organisation need to agree that timescale for the resit or the retake. A resit is typically taken within 2 months of the endpoint assessment outcome notification. Now, the timescale for a retake is dependent on how much retraining is required, and it's typically taken within 3 months of the endpoint assessment outcome notification. Now, if the apprentice fails the presentation with questions component, they will need to be given a new topic to present it on. Again, this will be released by the assessor. Resits and retakes are not offered to bump up the grade. So if they want to pass to a higher grade, they are capped at a pass. So just to reiterate, the apprentice will get a maximum EPA grade of a pass if they need to resit or retake one or more component methods. That will mean that the overall grade, because don't forget they've got to get distinction in both areas, will be capped at a pass. Now, the caveat to this is unless there are exceptional circumstances, and again, that will be at the discretion of the endpoint assessment organisation through discussions with the employer and apprentice. Okay, if we could just move on to the next slide. So we have produced some mapping documents which just give brief overviews. They should be available for you and links are in the slides. Like I say, please put any questions that you've got into the question box. Hopefully we'll get through for some now, but time depending, we may need to move on. But over to Julie, thank you so much.
Hey, that's great. Thanks very much for that level of detail, Rebecca. That was excellent. So yes, we have got some questions. Some of them have been answered in the box, so I'm sure everybody can see those. And of course, we will submit these along with the recordings. So we have got a question, Rashenda. I'm wondering if you could possibly answer this, just about the level 5, level 3, and level 5 diplomas and when they'll be available. I know that's something we're working on. Yeah.
Yep, so in terms of both have been taken now to the development team for consideration. However, just to manage expectations, when we're rewriting resources and upgrading our materials that support apprenticeships, it can take up to 9 months. So that's just to help manage the expectations. However, in the interim, what we're doing is Rebecca is going to be creating a mapping document that will help to straddle what is in the existing diploma and workbooks and what how that will meet the revised standard. So just as a holding piece of work, really, just because of the extent of time it takes to redevelop a whole suite of new materials.
Thanks very much, Rashenda. So when should we expect the mapping matrices to be available? So again, I think that ties in with the resources, really, doesn't it, Rashenda? I'm hoping we've got some mapping documents that Rebecca's just referred to, which shows the difference between the versions, and they're all available from the link if you haven't already received them. But I think you're talking specifically about the matrix for each of the standards. Rashenda, sorry to come back to you on that one.
Sorry, that I think in terms of the initial resources now, the mapping document is there. Is that what we mean in terms of the
I think so, but maybe we can pick up on that one later. Yeah, maybe
with the person who's asked the question.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one, we'll just answer a couple more. We've got one from Gavin around the portfolio of evidence. Written assignments to questions are not shown. Does that mean knowledge evidence is not needed in the portfolio? Rebecca, is that something you could answer?
Yeah, definitely. The knowledge, skills and behaviours need to be presented in the portfolio for sure. So the apprentice needs to be able to link all the KSBs that are going to be assessed in the professional discussion in that portfolio.
Yeah, Great. And then I think if we just answer one more, there's a couple around the presentation topic, and then we'll answer the rest of them within the Q&A as a follow-up. So just to confirm how the topic for the presentation is selected. Rebecca, if you could answer that one.
Of course, yeah. So what happens at Gateway, the portfolio is reviewed by the independent assessor. City and Guilds will have created a bank of presentation topics. All of those will be linked to the KSBs related to the presentation and questions. But what the assessor does at that point is they look at the strengths of the portfolio. So if the apprentice has provided a breadth and depth, but they may have a particular role within an organisation, they may choose a topic that supports the strength of that apprentice to allow them to really be able to demonstrate the level of competence within that particular area.
That's great. Thanks very much, Rebecca, indeed. So we'll answer the rest of those with the Q&A. So what we'll now do is move over to Maurice to talk a little bit about our EPA support. Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everybody. I'm Maurice Hole. I'm one of 3 EPA partnership managers across City and Guilds and ILM to support you with that endpoint assessment journey. Could you move on to the next slide, please, Julie? Thank you. So I'm going to reiterate some of the information that we did do on the first webinar, and that's because we just want to make you aware and show that you are supported through, change of assessment plans for endpoint assessment. So I just wanted to first of all go through EPA Pro and some of the factors within the platform that really help support you through the journey of the endpoint assessment. So EPA Pro is tailored access for you, for your learners and for employers, so you can all have visibility to see that journey and see resources and support to help through your endpoint assessment. We'll give tailored notifications, and we'll give notifications to learners just before they're about to go into their endpoint assessment as well, as reminders that those components are coming up for them. There is a tailored gateway process as well. As we know with change, there's lots of different people that may upload gateway documentation, declarations and evidence. It's tailored to each version of a standard and each standard. So you're able to see when you process your learner exactly what you need to upload as you submit your learner through to Gateway. Your fees and registration, so you'll pay your registration fee when you upload your apprentice onto EPA Pro, and then the rest is payable on completion. And on completion, your results take 7 working days to come into EPA Pro. And you'll also get feedback. You'll get all grade feedback that comes when your learners finish. So you'll be able to use that to share with your learners and also help support your standardisation for future learners. There will be a wealth of support in EPA Pro for the new version of the standard as well. So there will be some amplification documents and resources, as we have with our previous standards and versions, to support you with that endpoint assessment journey. Next slide, please, Julie. So as I mentioned, I'm one of 3 EPA partnership managers. So we're split across the country. We've got Janice Collins in the north, Rebecca Hollenby in the Midlands, and myself in the south. And we're here to support you through that journey with the platforms and any questions that you may have as you submit your learners through. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions or need any support with that journey. And following on from the webinar, we're here to support you through with that information. Just as some other information as well of who's here to support you through change, you'll have your dedicated account managers that you can reach out to. You'll have Julie, our technical advisor. We have our digital solutions managers as well to support with all of our platforms. Your events booking team, so to help liaise with when it comes to booking your dates, and centre support. So there's a wealth of people here to support you as well as you progress through your on programme and through to your endpoint assessment. So please use us if you have any questions. Next slide, please, Julie.
Okay, thanks very much, Maurice.
Thank you,
I'm just going
Julie.
to talk to you. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I'm going to talk a little bit about the timelines for EPA. I can see that we've got a few questions around this. So what you can see there is the timelines for this new version. And so, of course, at Gateway, we've already talked about everything that's required in terms of that Gateway stage, and the portfolio will come in. And then we have that timeline when we do all our checking, check all the forms are signed, and then the portfolio is checked for completeness. And then within a very short period of time, the presentation topic is allocated once all the Gateway requirements have been met. The apprentice then prepares their presentation, and in this version they've got 4 weeks from Gateway approval, so from the notification that everything's been approved, to prepare that presentation, which then they'll be uploaded, that get uploaded to our platform, and then the event will be a minimum of 2 weeks following that submission of that presentation. So the apprentice for this version now has 4 weeks to complete the presentation, and then so in effect the EPA that will be at the earliest point 6 weeks on from that time frame. We can confirm all of this, of course, in any of the Q&A, but just to give you an overview of those time frames. Now, Rebecca did touch on this, but we do need to have reasonable adjustment requests agreed pre-Gateway. So if there are any special considerations or any requests that need to be put into place, then this must all be agreed before Gateway. Unfortunately, our assessors are not in a position in a live event to make any agreement or make any adjustments to the way that the EPA is being run. So we have got some quite specific policies. So if you need any guidance on that, then please do reach out. And again, it's all detailed in the assessment plan, but do reach out and we can support you with that. It's really important that that's sorted in advance. And then for those of people that may be newer working with us, just to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of working with ILM for this particular standard. So what you'll get from us is all students and tutors can get access to student resources from our membership partner, the Institute of Leadership, whilst they're completing and whilst they're on programme. So from the point at which they're registered with us in EPA Pro, they'll get access to that wealth of resources. On successful completion, they will all be awarded a globally recognised digital credential. So they'll get the paper certificates from iFate, which get sent from iFate directly to their employer. But then your apprentices will receive that digital credential from us. And of course, they can align that with our global brand recognition. And then just a couple of slides to talk to you about some of the benefits of things that they can access to with those resources. A whole host of learning resources structured under the dimensions of leadership, webcasts, worksheets, research reports. If anybody needs any specific support, then please do reach out if you think your tutor team don't have this access. And of course, if you feel your learners are not getting the access that they should have, then please reach out. We've got some slides and information and routes to access that we can share with you. And then, of course, what they can do is to share their digital credentials on successful completion online. I think particularly on platforms like LinkedIn, when they're thinking about that digital professional brand, which I think is becoming increasingly important. So of course it does give them that CV for life, so there's not the issue of lost certificates, which I'm sure many of us have faced. So again, more information about how the digital credentials work, then please again do reach out to any of us within the team. And then just to keep you up to date of upcoming webinars, we have the Q&A for this webinar on the next session on the 2nd of October, so do sign up for that if you haven't. Running concurrently while we're on this webinar is the Ask the Auditor. Of course, all of our webinars are recorded and will sit on the website, so if you think that will be something that's useful for you, both that Ask the Auditor and those funding web updates, then you can sign up for them, but you can certainly get the recordings, which are stored on both the City and Guilds and the ILM website. And of course, then just keeping you up to date with our channels in terms of leadership and management updates, that you can sign up in terms of the preferences, and then you can follow us on those main social media channels. Okay, so that's it from us. Just want to say thank you for joining us today, and we'll send the recording out within the next few days. So thanks very much indeed, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thank you. those that are interested in the level 5 will begin that in about 2 minutes. So for those staying on for the level 5 webinar.